How's everybody doing? Again, like I said yesterday on the podium, I think it always starts here just with a shout out to the great state of Texas and the High School Coaches Association and everything that they do to promote football within this state. I think I have a unique perspective on Texas football as a guy who didn't grow up here, but is now going into my 6th year being part of football in this state. And it's different. And the passion around the football in this state and what it means to these towns and Friday nights is really unique in this state. And so it's just great for me and all of the coaches to come out here and kind of give back however we can. And so it's great to be here. It's great to kind of provide insight to the coaches. It's great to be a resource. And from there, I'll kind of open it up to questions.
Mike Roach, 24/7 Sports. I know you can't speak specifically about the prospects in this class, but you guys are putting together a really strong recruiting year. I think you talked last year about getting here the first year, trying to catch up to the board and playing from behind. Do you feel like you're more this being in your second year has helped kind of that success so far?
Yeah, I think recruiting is really a 2-year process from a relationship standpoint, and I think when we got hired, obviously the 24 class was done, and you had about 8 days to figure out what you were doing there, and really you were a year into the 25s. And so while I think we were able to put together a really strong class, there were also a lot of kids that from a relationship standpoint, we were just a year behind when we started. And so we felt like from the beginning, 26 was going to be the first time we were on a level playing field from relationship building and evaluating and communicating. And so, I think time always helps. And I don't know that everybody truly understands how long the recruiting process is for the top end players in the country.
Mike Craven, Dave Campbell's Texas Football. Yesterday, Sarkisian made a comment about having an obligation to keep the best players in Texas. How do you go about balancing fielding the best roster and recruiting being more national, but also kind of taking care of your own backyard?
Yeah, I think everything we do starts in Texas. I think it's the kids that we know the most. I think it's the kids we identify the earliest. I think it's the relationships that start the fastest. And I think everything in recruiting has to have an inside-out approach. And I think you start that way always, and you identify who you think within this state helps you win at the level that you want to win at. And then I think in this day and age with social media and NIL and all of the other things that are part of it, I think kids are looking to go to different places a little bit more. And I think national recruiting is a big part of it. And so I think you have to, no different than the transfer portal, you have to have the ability to supplement the class where necessary. And so, we have an obligation to the state of Texas to evaluate and identify these kids, and we do that. And I think we recruit Texas first and foremost, and I think we're in high schools in this state more often than we are any other state, obviously. And I think that's where we would love it all to start from. But I think realistically, to build the roster, there's a national part of it that has to be a piece in some way.
Coach Chris Hummer with CBS Sports. What did you see in Marcel Reed in the second half of last year that made you all as a staff comfortable in committing to him as your quarterback going to next year, and also building around him, frankly, with some of the stuff y'all took in the portal?
Yeah, I think that, I think he developed and improved every year. I think him inserting back in the LSU game obviously gave us an unbelievable spark to win that game down the stretch. And then, I've said this a lot this offseason. I think when you look at what he did in the fourth quarter of the Auburn game and the fourth quarter of the bowl game, leading us on drives to take the lead late in the game, I think you saw a lot of growth and maturation from him. And so we've got a ton of confidence in who he is. I think if people would look into the numbers and the stats, you would see a kid who had a very productive year amongst some of the younger quarterbacks in this league and compared very favorably to that. And, I think he's going to have a great year this year.
Hey, Coach, Dave Wilson from ESPN. I can imagine your level of interest in this, but I think 11 schools got votes in the SEC media poll for SEC champions, and A&M was not one of them. In terms of your start last year and then your finish, you felt like you're right there, and you're disappointed in the finish. What is your level of confidence this year? What do you make into going into year two with all that on your plate?
Yeah, I think the initial lead-in was probably very accurate. My interest level in that is none. I think we, as a program, want to do the things we need to do in the off season to give us a chance to be successful. Nobody was talking about us last year, and 3/4 of the way into the season, we were the last undefeated team standing. I think what happens on the field is what happens on the field, and I think everything that we are trying to do is to make sure that that product is right. I think we've spent a lot of time on making sure that if we get in that situation again, we can finish the right way, and I think that's what we really focused on.
Alex Miller at the Bryan College Station Eagle. Just given the setting, I wanted to ask you about a guy on your personnel staff, DJ Mann. What drew you guys to him when you hired him, and just what have his connections maybe in the Texas high school scene done and benefited for you?
Yeah, I think bringing DJ in, obviously he's a former high school coach. He's a former member of the board of the Texas High School Coaches Association, and I think we were looking for continued development in guys who have connections within the state of Texas. And so he's kind of slid over into the high school relations role for us. And I think he's a great point person for Texas high school coaches, because there are a lot of coaches who are obviously very familiar with him and who he is and what he does. And so I think it's just a great conduit from our program to the Texas high school coaches. And, those things are great to have.
Hey, Mike. Kirk Bowles from the Houston Chronicle. I was curious how this spring was different from your first spring last season. And was there one or two things you wanted to emphasize the most to your team this past spring? Yeah,
it was different because the first day we went out there, everyone knew where to go. That was a huge positive. I think we're just we had a different starting point, right? And I think that's so critical, and I don't know how to not overstate that. But when you go out there and there's just a much better foundation for how practice goes, tempo, what expectations are, scheme 101. It allows you to start at a much higher level that you can build from, and that's exciting. And again, the emphasis for us was just finishing. And so we did some different things to make the last period of practice competitive every day in some way, shape, or form, with a result that had a consequence or a reward in some way, shape, or form, just to try to emphasize how critically important that last part of everything was. Obviously that's last season for us, right? If we finish the season, it's a different outset, obviously, but also if we just finish 2 of the games down the stretch, it's a different season. And so, we just tried to do some different things to make sure we emphasize that. Those things are all we need it all. And so I hear coaches get up here and give you like good sound bites, but at the end of the day, we have to be more physical. We have to be able to run we're playing in a league that has more draft picks than any other league in the country. And so when you do that, you can't just be physical and slow. You can't just be fast and unphysical. You've got to be extremely diverse in how you can play the game of football. And so I can give you the soundbite, but it's everything. You're trying to enhance everything within your program. I think that's really, really important in our league.
Coach, right here in the back, Matt Roy, News 4 Fox SA here in San Antonio. I wanted to ask you, you have a lot of San Antonio area players on the roster. One I wanted to ask you about is Jacob Zeno coming in from UAB. You don't usually see a lot of grad transfers coming in to potentially be a backup to a Marcel Reed, who's the heir apparent at quarterback. What did you see in him, and what was the decision to bring in a veteran like that? Yeah,
I joke with him. You also don't see a lot of 28-year-old college quarterbacks anymore. He's not 28. I'm kidding, but no, I think we had a really young room, and we were trying to find a veteran presence, a guy who had experience. Obviously, there's competition in our program, and so the opportunity to compete is there. And should he come in and identify himself to be the better quarterback, that would be an opportunity for him. But I think he just wanted to come back to Texas and play in one of the bigger programs in the state and put himself on that stage one last time. And I think it all just kind of clicked together. And so we're really excited about him. I think he's really developed this summer. I think he's a lot more comfortable with what we're doing with our package. I think it's a little bit different than maybe what he's done at some other places. And so I think he's getting more comfortable with it and has a better feel. And so I think we're excited to see kind of what he can do this fall camp and into the season.
Coach Travis Brown at KBTX. Over the last 8 years when you started first at A&M, what has been the biggest change in recruiting besides money, of course? What do you think has been how has the prospect changed and the pitch and everything?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I have a great feel for the 8 years. I think in R2 though, being back as the head coach, I think we've tried to really emphasize game day. I think one of the things that has always struck me about Texas A&M is, when you come to Texas A&M in April and you come to Texas A&M in September on a Saturday night when we're playing a game, there's a really different feel and vibe. And so, we tried to get a lot of kids out to games last fall. Obviously, we had a lot of primetime matchups to attract players too. That was helpful. That's something that I think is really big. Our difference maker is Kyle Field. When you're in Kyle Field on a Saturday, your impression of Texas A&M is different. And I think it's one of the things that maybe was lost my first time around. I don't know how much credit was given to the Alabama game in 2021 for the amount of kids that decided to join the Texas A&M program that year. You know what I mean? Like that atmosphere that night, what that felt like. Excuse me. A lot of those kids that wound up in that 22 class were at that game. And certainly a lot of the kids that stuck in the program were at that game. And so I just think we've tried to shift to really emphasize that, and it's not necessarily the big recruiting event or the big this, that, or the other. It's get them to Kyle when we are playing and let them see what the passion of Texas A&M football is really about, and that's been really big for us.
Mike Samcon from The Athletic. When you are managing your roster and deciding what money goes where and how it's broken down, how involved, how hands-on are you in that? How much do you delegate to staff?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I'm a football, been studying football forever. That's just kind of who I've been. And, for so many years, you heard the NFL coaches complain about their lack of roster management control, right? And every head coach in the NFL hated the fact that somebody else had complete and total control of his roster. Now you're seeing it play out in college, and you're seeing college coaches talk about how they want someone else to handle roster management. And so I'm the other way. I want to be aware of everything that we're doing. I want to be involved in every one of those decisions. I don't necessarily want to be involved in every one of those conversations. I don't think that's healthy, but I think, as you're talking about, how to allocate resources, what positions, what players, what you want to do from a retention standpoint, to me, there's a part of that's the fun part of the job, because you're trying to build the most competitive roster that you can. And I'm not in a position yet in my life where I really want to delegate that too much. And Derek Miller does an unbelievable job. And so I don't want to take away from his role. It's very collaborative, and Derek has a lot of ideas, and there's a lot of times where he'll have ideas that I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that. But we sit down together and kind of go through that every step along the way.
Sean J. Rogers from CBS Sports. Coach, I want to circle back to Coach Mann just for a second. And, you're at Texas A&M. You're at one of the flagship programs in the state of Texas. I'm curious.
I didn't say that. You did.
Yes.
Just
correct.
before that
Correct.
goes
Correct.
viral
Correct.
again from our wonderful fans over in Austin.
Hey, listen, that's on me. That's on me. But I'm curious, right? What exactly is the utility of having a guy like that in terms of how you actually do your process?
Yeah, there's so many levels of what we're trying to do. There's identification, there's evaluation, there's acquisition, all of that kind of falls into the world of recruiting nowadays, and a lot of people have a lot of different parts of that. But there's also just a part of it that is relationships, and there's a part of it when you put together a recruiting staff that is just who is the guy that is making sure high school coaches know when we're practicing, who is the guy that knows how high school coaches can get tickets, who is the guy that can be the contact point when high school coaches come on our campus. And so, there's a part of it that's just relationships with high school coaches. And I think that's kind of the avenue that DJ has slid into very effectively because of the relationships he has with the coaches in this state. And again, I've been to a lot of schools. I've been to a lot of areas in this state. I've shown my face a ton, but I didn't grow up coaching football in the state of Texas, and there are a lot of head coaches in this state who did. And so, just a way for me, someone to help bridge that gap, has been really helpful. Good. Thank you, guys.